The phone shrilled through the silence of my home at 2:17 a.m., a sound sharp enough to slice through the fog of sleep. I've always dreaded calls in the dead of night. They carry a weight no daylight ring could bear, as if the darkness itself conspires to deliver ruin. My hand, trembling with a premonition I couldn't name, reached for the receiver on the third ring. The voice on the other end was clinical, devoid of warmth, yet it carried the force of a tidal wave. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Mercy Hospital. Your son James has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You need to come immediately." The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. The air in my lungs turned to ash, and the room spun, the shadows on the walls twisting into shapes I couldn't decipher. James, my only child, my brilliant, kind-hearted son, couldn't be dying. At 65, I'd endured the loss of my husband a decade ago, a wound that had carved itself into my bones, but this defied the natural order, a mother outliving her child. It was unthinkable, yet the voice on the phone spoke with the certainty of fate. I stumbled out of bed, still in my nightgown, pulling a coat over my shoulders as if it could shield me from what was coming. My hair was a tangle, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. The drive to the hospital was a blur, the city lights bleeding into streaks of gold and crimson, like warnings painted across the night sky. I whispered prayers I hadn't uttered in years, bargaining with powers I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Not James, not my boy. At the hospital, the sterile fluorescence burned my eyes as I gave my name at the reception desk. A doctor, his face grim as stone, led me to a private consultation room. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else, something intangible, like the presence of death itself. His words came like a blade. "Massive aneurysm, no warning signs, nothing could have been done. He's already gone. Already gone." The phrase echoed in my skull, each syllable a hammer blow. My James, with his quiet laugh and sharp mind, reduced to a past tense. Hours blurred into a haze of paperwork and impossible decisions. Choices no mother should ever face. I moved through them mechanically, my heart a hollow drum. By noon, Sophia, James's wife of 10 years, finally arrived. She swept into the room like a specter, her designer sunglasses perched on her nose, hiding her eyes. Her manicured nails, painted a deep burgundy, tapped impatiently on her phone. "Traffic," she said. Her voice clipped, not meeting my gaze. And I had to find someone to watch Lucas. I stared at her, my grief momentarily eclipsed by disbelief. Lucas, their 8-year-old son, my grandson, had been left in the dark about his father's condition. I'd already called his school, spoken to his teacher, and arranged for him to stay with his best friend's family. That Sophia hadn't thought to do this, hadn't prioritized her own child, was a stark reminder of the woman my son had married, a woman I'd never fully understood. "James is gone," I said, my voice flat, watching her closely for any crack in her polished facade. Her lips, perfectly lined with crimson, formed a small O of surprise. Her hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture that might have convinced a stranger. But I'd spent years studying human behavior as a psychology professor, and I knew a performance when I saw one. Sophia's movements were too deliberate, too choreographed, like an actress playing a role she hadn't quite mastered. "He was fine yesterday," she said, her voice catching just enough to sound convincing. "We had dinner, and he was working in his study. I went to bed early. I didn't even say good night." For a fleeting moment, something genuine flickered across her face. Regret, perhaps. Or guilt. but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by an expression I couldn't pin down. Relief and calculation? Whatever it was, it slithered beneath her mask of shock, a shadow moving in deep waters. The day dragged on, each moment a fresh cut. Sophia made hushed phone calls, stepping away whenever hospital staff approached with questions about funeral arrangements. When it came time to decide on James's remains, she deferred to me with a casualness that chilled me. "You know what he would have wanted better than I do," she said, her tone light, as if discussing dinner plans. I nodded, too numb to challenge her, but my mind cataloged the moment. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. As evening fell, we waited for James's body to be released to the funeral home. That's when Thomas Bennett arrived, his presence like a lighthouse in a storm. James's closest friend since law school and his personal attorney, Thomas carried a grief so raw it mirrored my own. His eyes were red-rimmed, his embrace tight as he held me. "I can't believe he's gone," he whispered. "I just had lunch with him on Monday." I nodded, words failing me. Thomas turned to Sophia, offering condolences that she met with a practiced nod, her sunglasses still shielding her eyes. "We'll need to meet soon," he said, his voice shifting to a professional edge. "There are matters in James's will that require immediate attention." Sophia straightened, dabbing at eyes that remained suspiciously dry. "Of course. Tomorrow, perhaps. I'd like to settle things quickly, for Lucas's sake." The mention of my grandson pierced through my fog of grief. Lucas, sweet and sensitive, who had lost his father, and whose mother seemed more concerned with expediency than mourning. Lucas should be told in person, I said firmly, my voice finding strength I didn't know I had. "I'll go with you to pick him up." "That's not necessary," Sophia replied, her tone sharp, the word "my" in "my own son" carrying a possessive edge. "I can handle it." The dynamic was familiar, Sophia asserting control over Lucas when it suited her image as a devoted mother, while leaving the actual parenting to James, and increasingly to me. "He adores you," she added, her voice softening artificially. "He'll need his grandmother more than ever now." The words were honeyed, but I saw the calculation behind them. After 30 years of studying human behavior, I could spot manipulation a mile away. Sophia was already positioning herself, ensuring I'd remain available for childcare while she maintained her carefully curated boundaries. As we left the hospital, I caught her reflection in a window, adjusting her hair, checking her phone. In that unguarded moment, with no audience to perform for, her face was a blank slate. No grief, no shock, only a cool, assessing gaze, like a chess player plotting her next move. My heart broke anew. Not only had I lost my son, but my grandson was in the hands of a woman who saw his father's death as an inconvenience at best, an opportunity at worst. What I didn't know then was that James had seen this coming. He'd woven a web of protections, hidden in plain sight, to shield Lucas and me from the woman he'd come to recognize as a threat. In the days ahead, as I navigated the fog of grief, I'd uncover the depth of his foresight and the shadows Sophia hid behind her perfect mask. But that night, as I returned to my empty house, I clutched a childhood photo of James to my chest, its edges worn from years of love. For Lucas, I told myself. I must be strong for Lucas. Something in Sophia's behavior had awakened a fire in me, a primal instinct to protect. My grandson had lost his father. I'd be damned if he lost his grandmother too, not when I sensed he'd need me more than ever. Yet, as I lay in the dark, a strange sensation stirred, like a whisper from beyond. It wasn't just grief or instinct. It was as if James's presence lingered, guiding me towards secrets he'd left behind. The hospital's fluorescent lights had seemed to flicker oddly when Thomas spoke of the will, and the air had felt charged, as if the universe itself was trying to tell me something. I dismissed it as exhaustion, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of unraveling a mystery James had set in motion. The church was a cavern of echoes, its stained glass windows casting fractured rainbows across the pews, as if the light itself mourned my son. James's funeral was a theater of grief, but as I sat in the front row, clutching Lucas's small hand, I felt like the only one not playing a part. At 65, I'd attended enough funerals to recognize the language of sorrow, how it twists some into silence, others into rage, and a few into eerie calm. But there was always an authenticity to true grief, a rawness that couldn't be faked. Sophia, my daughter-in-law, was giving a masterclass in performance, and I was her reluctant audience. She stood near James's casket, a vision in a designer black dress that hugged her figure with calculated elegance, appropriate yet alluring, a paradox only she could pull off. Her hair fell in subdued waves, her makeup flawless, with tear-proof mascara that betrayed no smudge. Despite her occasional dabbing with a monogrammed handkerchief, she leaned against me at precise intervals, murmuring platitudes like, "James would have loved this turnout," or, "He always spoke so highly of these people." To the mourners, we were a united front, a grieving widow and a heartbroken mother holding each other up. But I felt the lightness of her touch, the way she straightened the moment someone of importance approached, her eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing its prey. Lucas, seated on my other side, was the opposite, his grief as real as the tears streaking his blotchy face. His small body trembled with silent sobs, and I kept my arm around him, offering tissues and whispers of comfort. "Is Daddy really in there?" he asked, during a lull in the service, his voice barely audible over the organ's mournful hum. I glanced at the polished mahogany casket, its surface gleaming under the church's lights, and felt a pang in my chest. "His body is," I said gently, choosing my words with care. "But the part that made him Daddy, his love, his thoughts, his spirit, that's still with you, always." Lucas nodded, his 8-year-old mind grappling with the distinction in a way that felt wiser than his years. "I can still feel him sometimes," he whispered, "like he's watching." "I believe he is," I replied, fighting back tears. The air seemed to shimmer for a moment, a faint ripple in the light that made the hairs on my neck stand up. It was as if James's presence lingered, not just in Lucas's words, but in the very atmosphere of the church. I shook off the sensation, chalking it up to grief, but a part of me, the part that had studied the human psyche for decades, wondered if there was something more. Sophia's voice cut through my thoughts. "Lucas, sit up straight. People are watching." Her tone was sharp, her focus on appearances rather than her son's pain. I felt Lucas's shoulders stiffen under my arm, and my heart ached for him. This was why James had been leaving Lucas with me more often over the past year, weekends disguised as father-son bonding that I now suspected were meant to shield Lucas from Sophia's growing detachment. The procession of mourners was endless, each offering stories that painted a vivid picture of my son's life. A woman clasped my hands, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "James helped me keep my house during my divorce," she said. "He reduced his fees when he knew I was struggling, then connected me with financial advisors who turned my life around." An elderly man, his voice thick with emotion, added, "James took my discrimination case when no one else would. He cared about justice, not just billable hours. Each story was a bittersweet gift, a reminder of the man James had been, kind, principled, quietly humorous. I stored them in my heart, knowing Lucas would need them someday. But Sophia's behavior was a stark contrast. She moved through the crowd with the grace of a seasoned actress, her voice shifting subtly depending on her audience. Warm and deferential with James's wealthier clients, cool and distant with his childhood friends. I caught her in whispered conversations, stepping away from the main gathering to speak into her phone, her words too low to hear, but her posture tense, secretive. Once, I saw her with a tall man in an expensively tailored suit, someone I didn't recognize. Their conversation was brief but intense, her hand brushing his arm in a way that suggested familiarity beyond business. When I approached, they parted smoothly, and Sophia introduced him as Richard Harlow, one of James's real estate investment partners. "My condolences, Mrs. Reynolds," Richard said, his handshake brief, his tone polished but hollow. "James was a remarkable man." Something in his voice rang false, like a note played slightly off-key. Sophia's smile was tight, her hand lingering on his arm for a fraction too long. I filed the moment away, my professor's mind cataloging details even through my grief. Richard's presence felt like a piece of a puzzle I didn't yet understand, a shadow cast by a light I couldn't see. As the reception wore on, exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole. Lucas had fallen asleep on a couch in the funeral home's private room, his small body curled into itself, emotionally spent. I draped his suit jacket over him like a blanket, smoothing his hair as I watched him breathe. The sight of him, so vulnerable, so alone, stirred something fierce within me, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a sentinel, guarding the one piece of James left in this world. Thomas Bennett approached quietly, his face etched with sorrow, but his eyes sharp with purpose. "Eleanor, can we speak privately?" he asked, his voice low. I followed him to a secluded corner, away from the lingering mourners and Sophia's watchful gaze. The air here felt different, heavier, as if it carried secrets waiting to be uncovered. "James left explicit instructions," Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He asked me to tell you one thing immediately. Trust your instincts about Lucas. Does that make sense to you?" I glanced at Lucas, still asleep, then at Sophia, who was now checking her makeup in a compact mirror, nodding absently at a mourner's condolences. "Yes," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I believe it does." Thomas nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. We'll need to meet tomorrow about the will, but James wanted you to know that." He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "Arrangements have been made for both of you." Before I could press him further, Sophia approached, her social smile firmly in place. "Thomas," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "I hope we can resolve everything quickly. I'm thinking of taking Lucas away for a while after this, a healing trip. It'd be best to handle the estate matters promptly." "Of course," Thomas replied, his tone neutral but his eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. Caution, perhaps, or knowledge. "My office, tomorrow at 2. As Sophia walked away, her heels clicking on the polished floor, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in a nearby window. For a moment, the glass seemed to ripple, distorting her image into something almost otherworldly. A figure cloaked in shadow, her eyes glinting with an unnatural light. I blinked, and the illusion was gone, replaced by her perfect composure. My heart raced. Was it grief playing tricks? Or was there something more at play, something James had known and tried to warn me about? We left the funeral home as the sky darkened, a storm brewing on the horizon. I carried Lucas to my car, his slight weight a precious burden. Sophia made no move to help, instead scrolling through her phone, muttering about missed calls and arrangements. 17 missed calls, she sighed, her voice devoid of the exhaustion grief should bring. So many things to handle. What arrangements? I asked, keeping my tone curious rather than accusing. Life goes on, Eleanor, she said, not looking up from her screen. Bills, accounts, notifications. James handled everything. Now it's all on me. The solitary me spoke volumes, not us, not we'll figure it out together for Lucas. Just her, alone, already moving forward. As I settled Lucas into the car, Sophia asked if I could keep him overnight to give her space to process. The request was casual, but it sent a chill through me. I nodded, maintaining my facade of compliance, but inside, a fire was kindling. Something about her words, her detachment, felt like a warning, a signal that the game had begun, though I didn't yet know the rules. Driving home, I felt that strange sensation again, as if James's presence hovered just out of reach. The radio flickered, static crackling before settling on a song James used to hum when Lucas was a baby. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Was it coincidence? Or was my son reaching out, guiding me toward truths he'd hidden in life? I glanced at Lucas in the rear-view mirror, his face peaceful in sleep, and made a silent vow. Whatever secrets James had left behind, whatever shadows Sophia cast, I would uncover them. For Lucas, for James. The storm broke as I pulled into the driveway, rain lashing the windshield like tears from the heavens. In the darkness, my house felt different, as if it held its breath, waiting for me to step into the role James had prepared for me. I carried Lucas inside, his warmth grounding me against the growing sense of unease. As I tucked him into bed, I noticed a faint glow from the hallway, where a photo of James rested on a side table. The light pulsed softly, then faded, leaving only silence. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. This wasn't just grief. There was power here, James's power, woven into the fabric of our lives, waiting to be claimed. I didn't understand it yet, but I felt it, a spark of strength igniting within me. Sophia thought she held the upper hand, but she didn't know the woman I was becoming. A mother, a protector, and perhaps something more, guided by a force I was only beginning to sense. The lawyer's office was a fortress of oak and leather, its walls lined with books that smelled of time and authority. I sat across from Thomas Bennett, James's friend and attorney, in a high-backed chair that felt more like a throne than a seat for a grieving mother. The room was dimly lit, the heavy curtains drawn against the midday sun, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Lucas was at school, a decision I had made to shield him from whatever this meeting might unearth. Sophia sat beside me, her posture rigid, her hands folded primly in her lap. Her black dress, though less theatrical than at the funeral, still carried an air of performance, perfectly tailored, perfectly poised. But I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twitched slightly, betraying a nervousness she couldn't quite hide. Thomas cleared his throat, his eyes flickering between us. "Thank you both for coming," he said, his voice steady, but weighted with something unspoken. James left very specific instructions regarding his estate, and I'm here to execute them as his attorney. He opened a leather folder, revealing a stack of documents, each page marked with James's precise, familiar signature. My heart clenched at the sight. a reminder of the son I'd lost, whose foresight now seemed to reach from beyond the grave. I glanced at Sophia, expecting her to lean forward, eager for details. Instead, she sat back, her lips curved in a faint smile, as if she already knew what was coming, or thought she did. Her confidence unsettled me, like a breeze carrying the scent of an approaching storm. I'd spent decades studying human behavior, teaching students to read the unspoken language of the body. Sophia's composure wasn't that of a grieving widow. It was the stance of someone waiting to claim a prize. Thomas began reading the will, his voice measured. To my son, Lucas, I leave a trust fund for his education and care, to be managed by my mother, Eleanor Reynolds, until he reaches the age of 25. I nodded, unsurprised. James had always been meticulous about Lucas's future, setting aside funds for college, music lessons, even a summer camp he'd loved. But Sophia's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the armrest. It was a small crack in her facade, but I noticed it, and so did the shadows in the room, which seemed to shift ever so slightly, as if listening. Thomas continued, his tone growing firmer. To my mother, Eleanor Reynolds, I leave the family home, including all furnishings and land, as well as my two vehicles, a 2018 Lexus and a 2023 Tesla. Additionally, I bequeath to her a separate financial account established for her personal use to ensure her security and independence. The words hit like a thunderclap. The family home, James and Sophia's sprawling Victorian, where Lucas had taken his first steps, was mine. The cars, the account, all entrusted to me. I felt the air in the room thicken, a strange pressure building behind my eyes, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sophia's composure shattered, her face paling as she leaned forward, her voice sharp. There must be a mistake. That house is our home. Lucas's home. James wouldn't do this. Thomas's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held a glint of steel. There's no mistake, Sophia. James revised his will 6 months ago, and I witnessed the changes myself. Everything is legally binding. Sophia's gaze darted to me, her eyes narrowing, searching for weakness. Eleanor, you can't possibly want this. Think of Lucas. Uprooting him from his home, his room, his memories of his father. It's cruel. Her voice dripped with concern, but I saw the calculation behind it, the way she wielded Lucas's name like a weapon. My heart ached for my grandson, but something deeper, a spark of resolve kindled by James's trust, kept me steady. I'll do what's best for Lucas, I said, my voice calm but firm, meeting her gaze without flinching. James knew that. The words felt heavier than I intended, as if they carried a truth I hadn't fully grasped. The room seemed to hum, a faint vibration that made the chandelier above us flicker, casting fleeting patterns on the ceiling. Sophia didn't notice, her focus locked on Thomas. But I felt it. A presence, subtle but undeniable, as if James's will was more than paper and ink. Thomas slid a sealed envelope across the desk, his fingers lingering on it for a moment. Eleanor, James left this for you. He asked that you read it privately, but I'm to ensure you receive it now. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy, with my name written in James's meticulous handwriting. My breath caught, and I clutched it to my chest, feeling a warmth that shouldn't have been there, as if the paper held a fragment of my son's spirit. Sophia's eyes followed the envelope, her lips pressing into a thin line. "What's that?" she asked, her tone casual, but laced with suspicion. "A personal letter," Thomas replied smoothly. "It's for Eleanor alone." His words were a shield, deflecting Sophia's curiosity, but I saw the hunger in her eyes, the need to control every piece of this puzzle. She stood, smoothing her dress, and forced a smile. "We'll discuss the house later, Eleanor. For Lucas's sake, I'm sure we can reach an agreement." The word agreement hung in the air, sharp and loaded, like a blade hidden in silk. I nodded, playing the part of the compliant mother-in-law, but inside, my mind was racing. Sophia's reaction wasn't just about the house. It was about power, about maintaining her grip on a narrative I was beginning to suspect she'd rewritten long before James's death. As we left Thomas's office, Sophia's phone buzzed, and she stepped away to answer it, her voice low and urgent. I caught fragments. Not what we planned. Need to adjust. Before she glanced back, realizing I was within earshot, and ended the call abruptly. The storm outside had worsened, rain lashing the windows, and as we walked to our cars, a gust of wind tore through the parking lot, carrying a faint whisper that sounded eerily like James's voice. "Watch her." I froze, my heart pounding, but when I looked around, there was only Sophia, her umbrella snapping in the wind, her face unreadable. Back home, with Lucas safely at a friend's house, I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope from James glowing faintly under the lamplight, or so it seemed. My hands trembled as I broke the seal, the paper crinkling like a sapin mai. The letter began in James's steady hand, each word a lifeline pulling me into his mind. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry for the pain that brings you. You've always been my rock, the one who taught me to see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. That's why I'm trusting you with this, because I know you'll understand. And you'll protect Lucas." Sophia changed over the years. The woman I married is gone, replaced by someone I barely recognize. She's cunning, Mom, and she's dangerous, not in ways you'd expect, but in ways that erode trust, love, and truth. I've seen her manipulate situations, twist words, and prioritize her ambitions over our son. I've overheard calls, seen messages, and pieced together a plan she thinks I didn't notice. She's not alone in this. There's someone else, someone with influence, pulling strings I couldn't fully unravel. I've hidden protections for you and Lucas. The will is just the beginning. There's more. Evidence, accounts, even objects I've left in places only you would think to look. Trust your instincts, as you always taught me. Watch Sophia closely, but don't let her see your strength. She underestimates you, and that's your advantage. Lucas is my heart, Mom. He's the best of me, and he needs you now. I've left signs for you, things you'll recognize from our talks, our memories. Follow them. They'll lead you to what I couldn't finish. And Mom, don't be afraid of what you feel. There's more to this world than we know, and I'm still with you in ways I can't explain. With all my love, James' tears blurred the words, but I read them again, then again, each sentence igniting a fire within me. James hadn't just prepared a will. He'd woven a tapestry of safeguards, a labyrinth to protect us from Sophia's machinations. The mention of signs and more to this world sent a shiver down my spine. I thought of the flickering lights at the funeral, the whisper in the wind, the glow of the envelope. Was it possible James had tapped into something beyond the ordinary? Something that lingered to guide me? I stood pacing the kitchen, my grief transforming into purpose. My years as a psychology professor had taught me to read people, to anticipate their moves. Sophia thought she could outmaneuver me, but she didn't know the woman I was becoming. A mother fueled by love, a protector armed with her son's foresight. I'd play her game, let her believe I was the fragile, grieving widow she expected. But I'd be watching, recording, building a case to shield Lucas from whatever she was planning. That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, he stirred, his voice sleepy but clear. "Grandma, I dreamed Daddy gave me a key. He said it's for you to open something important." My breath caught. A key? Was it a child's imagination or another of James's signs? I kissed Lucas's forehead, promising to keep him safe, and as I turned off the light, the room seemed to pulse with that same faint glow I'd seen before, emanating from a photo of James on the nightstand. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window, the storm raging outside, and began to plan. Sophia's call in the parking lot, her reaction to the will, her alliance with the mysterious Richard Harlow, they were threads in a web I'd unravel. James had given me the tools, and something deeper, a power I couldn't yet name, was awakening within me. The shadows in my house no longer felt empty. They were alive with purpose, whispering of secrets waiting to be found. The days following the reading of James's will felt like navigating a labyrinth, each turn revealing new shadows and hidden traps. I moved through them with a purpose I hadn't known I possessed, my grief for James transforming into a steely resolve to protect Lucas. My home, once a sanctuary of memories, now hummed with an undercurrent of secrets, as if James had left echoes of himself in its walls. The faint glow I'd noticed in his photograph persisted, pulsing softly at the edge of my vision, especially when I thought of Lucas or read James's letter again. It was as if my son was guiding me, his presence a quiet force urging me to uncover what Sophia was hiding. Sophia, true to form, wasted no time. She called me the morning after the will reading, her voice dripping with honeyed concern. "Eleanor, we need to talk about the house," she said, as if it were a simple misunderstanding. "For Lucas's sake, we should keep things stable. You don't want to disrupt his life, do you?" Her words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, and I recognized the tactic, appealing to my love for my grandson to bend me to her will. But James's letter had sharpened my senses, and I played the part she expected, the grieving, pliable mother-in-law. "Of course, Sophia," I said, keeping my tone soft, deferential. "I just want what's best for Lucas. Let's meet and discuss it." She suggested a restaurant downtown, a place I knew James had avoided. Too flashy, too crowded with the kind of people Sophia courted. I agreed, sensing an opportunity to observe her in her element. In the meantime, I began to watch her closely, as James had urged. My years as a psychology professor had taught me to read behavior like a text, and Sophia's was a novel of contradictions. She was attentive to Lucas in public, snapping photos of him at the park for social media, her captions filled with hashtags about love and loss. But in private, her neglect was glaring. I kept Lucas most evenings, as Sophia claimed she needed space to grieve. Yet her grief seemed to involve late-night outings, her car pulling out of the driveway long after Lucas was asleep, returning just before dawn. One evening, while Lucas worked on a school science project, a model solar system he'd been excited about for weeks, I noticed he was quieter than usual. "Did Mommy help with your project?" I asked, stirring a pot of soup in my kitchen. Lucas shook his head, his eyes fixed on a papier-mâché Jupiter. "She said she was too busy. She's always on her phone now." I knelt beside him, my heart aching. "What does she talk about on the phone?" I asked gently. careful not to press too hard. He shrugged, but his voice was small. Stuff about moving. She told someone we might go to Arizona, but I don't want to leave you, Grandma. His words were a knife cutting through the haze of my grief. Arizona? Sophia hadn't mentioned a move, and the idea of her taking Lucas across the country felt like a violation of everything James had fought for. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I began my own investigation. James's letter had hinted at evidence, and I suspected he'd left clues in places only I would think to look. I started with his old study, a room in my house where he'd worked during his college years, now a repository of memories. The air felt charged as I entered, the glow from James's photo on the desk flickering faintly, as if urging me forward. I searched through drawers, finding nothing but old papers and pens, until my fingers brushed a hidden panel beneath the desk. It clicked open, revealing a small, locked box, engraved with a symbol I recognized, a spiral, the same design James had doodled as a child, calling it his lucky charm. The box required a key, and Lucas's dream about a key flashed in my mind. I didn't have it yet, but the discovery felt like a sign, a piece of James's puzzle falling into place. I tucked the box away, my resolve hardening. Whatever was inside, it was part of the protections James had promised. The next day, at the restaurant, Sophia was waiting in a corner booth, her appearance as polished as ever. The place was all glass and chrome, a stage for the elite, and she fit perfectly, her smile a beacon for passing waiters and patrons. But I saw the strain in her eyes, the way her fingers tapped her wine glass, a rhythm of impatience, not grief. "Eleanor, I've been thinking," she began, her voice smooth but rehearsed. "The house, the cars, it's all too much for you to manage alone, especially at your age. I propose a deal. Sign the house over to me, and I'll ensure Lucas can visit you whenever you want. It's the best way to keep things stable for him." The offer was a velvet trap, her words laced with concern, but reeking of manipulation. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "But James left the house to me for a reason, Sophia. Don't you think we should honor his wishes?" Her smile tightened, a crack in her mask. James was under stress when he wrote that will. He wasn't thinking clearly. Lucas needs his home, his mother. You don't want to tear him away from that, do you? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We can make this easy, Eleanor. No need for lawyers or complications." I felt a chill, not from her words, but from the air around us, which seemed to pulse with that same strange energy I'd sensed before. The restaurant's lights flickered, casting fleeting shadows across Sophia's face, and for a moment, her eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity, like a predator sizing up its prey. I blinked, and the illusion was gone, but my pulse quickened. Was this my imagination, or was something deeper at play, something James had known about? "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "for Lucas's sake." She nodded, satisfied, but I saw the calculation in her gaze, the belief that she'd won this round. As we left, I noticed her slip a note to a waiter, her movements quick and discreet. I pretended not to see, but my mind catalogued the moment, another thread in the web she was weaving. Over the next week, Sophia's neglect grew bolder. She left Lucas with a babysitter in Miami for 3 days, claiming a work trip that coincided with a gala attended by Richard Harlow, the man from the funeral. I learned this from a friend who'd seen them together, their body language suggesting intimacy rather than business. When Lucas returned, he was pale and wheezing, his asthma triggered by the babysitter's cigarette smoke. Sophia had forgotten to pack his inhaler, a detail that sent a surge of anger through me. I documented it all, dates, times, Lucas's condition, in a journal I kept hidden, guided by James's directive to watch and record. Thomas called me one evening, his voice urgent. "Eleanor, I've found something. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" When I arrived, he handed me a folder, its contents a bombshell, text messages between Sophia and Richard, retrieved from James's phone backups. They spoke of moving the plan forward, of securing the assets, and, most chillingly, of Lucas as a complication. Another document, a private investigator's report commissioned by James, detailed Sophia's meetings with Richard, their late-night outings, and a financial trail suggesting she'd been siphoning money from joint accounts. "James knew," Thomas said, his voice heavy. "He hired the investigator 6 months ago after he caught her in lies about her whereabouts. He was building a case, but he didn't have time to finish it." I clutched the folder, my hands trembling not with fear, but with fury. James had seen through Sophia's facade, and he'd trusted me to carry on his work. The room seemed to hum again, the air alive with that strange energy, and I swore I saw a faint spiral, the same symbol from the box, etched in the condensation on Thomas's window. It vanished when I blinked, but it felt like James's hand guiding me, urging me to keep going. That night, I searched my house again, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain. In James's old bedroom, I found a loose floorboard beneath his childhood bed, another hiding place only I would know. Inside was a key, small and silver, engraved with the same spiral. My heart raced as I retrieved the locked box from the study. The key fit perfectly, and inside was a USB drive and a note in James's handwriting. "For Lucas's future, trust the signs." I plugged the USB into my laptop, my hands shaking. It contained audio recordings, conversations between Sophia and Richard, their voices cold and calculating as they discussed selling James's investments and neutralizing any obstacles, including me. One recording mentioned a lockbox in a bank accessible only with a specific code James had never shared with Sophia. The realization hit me. James had hidden more than money. He'd hidden power, a legacy to protect Lucas from his mother's betrayal. As I listened, the glow from James's photo intensified, casting a warm light across the room. The air vibrated with a presence I could no longer dismiss. "You knew," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You're still here, aren't you?" The light pulsed once, as if in answer, and I felt a surge of strength, a certainty that I wasn't alone in this fight. James had left me tools, not just evidence, but something deeper, a connection that transcended death. Sophia called the next day, her voice sharper now, less patient. "Have you decided about the house, Eleanor? I don't want to drag this out." Her tone was a challenge, a test of my resolve. I smiled into the phone, my voice calm but laced with steel. "I'm still considering Sophia, but I'll do what's right for Lucas." As I hung up, I felt the weight of James's key in my pocket, a talisman of his trust. Sophia thought she was playing me, but she didn't know the woman I was becoming, a grandmother fueled by love, a scholar armed with evidence, and a guardian guided by a force that felt like magic. The shadows in my house whispered of secrets yet to be uncovered, and I was ready to follow them, no matter where they led. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper, its high ceilings and amplifying every sound, the shuffle of feet, the rustle of documents, the low murmur of spectators. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the weight of James's key in my pocket a silent anchor. Across the room, Sophia sat with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in a tailored suit who exuded the confidence of someone accustomed to winning. She looked the part of the grieving widow. Black blazer, subtle makeup, a single strand of pearls. But her eyes betrayed her, darting to the judge, the gallery, to me, as if calculating every angle of the room. I met her gaze briefly, my face a mask of calm, but inside, a fire burned, fueled by love for Lucas and the legacy James had entrusted to me. It had been 2 weeks since I'd found the USB drive and the note in James's hidden box. 2 weeks of sleepless nights spent poring over the evidence Thomas and I had compiled. The audio recordings of Sophia and Richard Harlow plotting to seize James's assets were damning. Their voices cold as they discussed Lucas as a complication to be managed. The private investigator's report detailed Sophia's financial missteps, money siphoned from joint accounts, meetings with Richard in hotel lobbies, plans to relocate to Arizona with funds James had intended for Lucas. My journal, meticulously kept, chronicled her neglect, the forgotten inhaler in Miami, the nights Lucas spent with strangers while she chased her ambitions, the science project she'd dismissed as unimportant. Each entry was a brick in the case we'd built, a case to protect Lucas from a mother who saw him as a pawn. Thomas, seated beside me, leaned close, his voice a low whisper. "We're ready, Eleanor. You've done everything James asked, and more. Let's finish this for him." His words carried a weight that went beyond the courtroom, as if he, too, felt the strange energy that had followed me since James's death. The air in the room seemed to hum, a faint vibration that made the chandelier above flicker, casting fleeting spirals of light across the ceiling, the same spiral etched on James's key and box. I nodded, drawing strength from the sign, convinced now that James was with me, guiding me through this battle. The hearing began with Judge Carlton, a stern woman with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, calling the court to order. Thomas presented our petition for emergency custody, his voice steady as he outlined Sophia's neglect and the evidence of her ulterior motives. He played the audio recordings, their words echoing through the courtroom like a confession from the shadows. Sophia's lawyer objected, claiming the recordings were inadmissible, but Judge Carlton overruled, her expression unreadable as she listened to Sophia's voice discuss neutralizing me and securing the estate. I took the stand, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. The weight of James's trust, the glow of his photograph, the whisper of his voice in the wind, they were with me, lending me a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Lucas is my grandson," I said, my voice clear and firm. "He's lost his father, and he needs stability, love, and someone who puts his needs first. Sophia has left him with strangers, forgotten his medical needs, and planned to uproot him without considering his emotional well-being. James entrusted me with his care, and I intend to honor that." Sophia's lawyer cross-examined me, his questions sharp, designed to paint me as an overbearing mother-in-law, meddling in a grieving widow's life. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Reynolds, that you've always disapproved of my client?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "That you've sought to control Lucas, to insert yourself into their family?" I met his gaze, my years as a psychology professor steadying me. "I loved my son, and I love my grandson," I said, each word deliberate. James saw something in Sophia that worried him, and he took steps to protect Lucas. I'm following his wishes, not my own. The courtroom seemed to still, the air growing heavy, and for a moment, I swore I saw a faint glow around the edges of my vision, as if James's presence was affirming my words. Sophia took the stand next, her performance flawless. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she spoke of her love for Lucas, her grief for James, and her struggle to balance motherhood with the demands of widowhood. "Eleanor means well," she said, her tone soft but calculated. "But she's overwhelmed by her own loss. She doesn't understand the bond between a mother and her son." The gallery murmured, some nodding in sympathy, and I felt a pang of doubt, not in my cause, but in the world's ability to see through her facade. But then Lucas was called to speak, a decision Judge Carlton had made after reviewing a psychologist's report on his emotional state. He walked to the stand, small and fragile in his pressed shirt, his eyes wide but steady. I held my breath, my heart aching for the weight he carried. The judge asked gentle questions, her voice kind but probing. "Lucas, can you tell us where you feel safest? Who takes care of you when you need help?" Lucas glanced at me, then at Sophia, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma takes care of me. She helps with my homework, makes sure I have my inhaler, and talks about Daddy so I don't forget him. Mommy's always busy, and sometimes she leaves me with people I don't know." He paused, his lip trembling. "I had a dream Daddy gave me a key. He said Grandma would use it to keep me safe." The courtroom fell silent, and I felt a jolt, as if the air itself had shifted. The spiral symbol flashed in my mind, and the key in my pocket seemed to grow warm, a tangible reminder of James's foresight. Sophia's face paled, her hands clenching in her lap, and I knew Lucas's words had struck a nerve. The mention of the key wasn't just a child's dream. It was a piece of James's puzzle, a sign he'd left for me to follow. Thomas called the psychologist next, a woman who'd evaluated Lucas over several sessions. She testified to his anxiety, his fear of being taken away from me, and the emotional neglect he'd experienced under Sophia's care. "Lucas thrives with Mrs. Reynolds," she said. "Her home provides the stability and emotional support he needs to process his father's death." The report was a cornerstone of our case, its pages heavy with the truth James had anticipated. Sophia's lawyer fought back, presenting her as a devoted mother struggling under grief's weight, but the evidence was overwhelming. The investigator's report, the recordings, my journal, they painted a picture of a woman whose priorities lay not with her son, but with her own ambitions. As the hearing drew to a close, Judge Carlton called a recess, her expression inscrutable as she retreated to her chambers. I stepped outside for air, the courthouse steps slick with rain from the storm that had followed me since James's death. The sky was a tumult of gray, and as I stood there, a gust of wind carried that same whisper I'd heard before. "Keep going." I clutched the key in my pocket, its warmth grounding me, and felt a surge of certainty. James was with me, not just in memory, but in a way that defied explanation, as if his love had woven itself into the fabric of the world. When we reconvened, Judge Carlton delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, including the testimony of Lucas Reynolds and the psychological evaluation, I grant temporary custody to Eleanor Reynolds for a period of 60 days, pending further review. Sophia Reynolds will have supervised visitation rights with conditions to ensure the child's well-being. Her gavel fell, a sound that echoed like a heartbeat, and I exhaled, tears stinging my eyes. Sophia's composure shattered. She stood, her voice rising in a rare display of raw anger. "This is outrageous! I'm his mother! You can't take him from me!" Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off, her eyes locking onto mine with a venom that sent a chill through me. For a moment, her shadow seemed to flicker, stretching unnaturally across the floor, as if something darker lurked beneath her polished exterior. I blinked, and it was gone, but the unease lingered. As we left the courtroom, Thomas squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Eleanor. James would be proud." I nodded, but my mind was already racing to the next step. Temporary custody was a victory, but Sophia's reaction told me she wouldn't surrender easily. The key in my pocket, the spiral symbol, the recordings. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, and I sensed James had left one final secret, one that would secure Lucas's future for good. That night, I tucked Lucas into bed, his small hand clutching mine. "Are you staying with me now, Grandma?" he asked, his voice hopeful, but tinged with fear. "For as long as you need me," I promised, kissing his forehead. As I turned off the light, the photo of James on the nightstand glowed faintly, its spiral symbol etched in light for a fleeting moment. I froze, my heart pounding. "Thank you, James," I whispered, feeling his presence like a warm embrace. The courtroom had been a battle, but I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a warrior, armed with love and guided by a power I was only beginning to understand. Sophia thought she could outmaneuver me, but she didn't know the strength I'd found, or the secrets James had left to ensure her defeat. The park was quiet, the autumn leaves drifting like embers in the late afternoon light. I sat on a bench, Lucas beside me, his small hands busy with a sketchbook, drawing a spiral that mirrored the symbol James had left behind. The air carried a crispness that felt cleansing, as if the world itself was exhaling after the storm of the past weeks. The temporary custody ruling had given us 60 days of peace, but I knew Sophia wasn't done. Her anger in the courtroom had been a warning, a promise of further battles. Yet, as I watched Lucas sketch, his face calm for the first time in months, I felt a quiet strength within me, a strength forged by grief, love, and the mysterious signs James had woven into our lives. Sophia had requested this meeting, her text curt but insistent. We need to talk, no lawyers, just us. I'd agreed, sensing an opportunity to gauge her next move. She arrived precisely on time, her heels clicking on the cobblestone path, her coat a deep burgundy that stood out against the muted tones of the park. Her face was a mask of composure, but her eyes, those calculating eyes, betrayed a flicker of unease. She sat across from us, her gaze lingering on Lucas before settling on me. "Eleanor," she began, her voice smooth but lacking its usual confidence. "I've been thinking about what's best for everyone. This fight, it's not good for Lucas. He doesn't need more disruption." Her words were rehearsed, but there was a tremor beneath them, a crack in her carefully constructed facade. I tilted my head, keeping my expression neutral, a skill honed over decades of studying human behavior. "What are you proposing, Sophia?" I asked, my tone gentle but probing. Lucas glanced up from his sketchbook, his eyes wary, and I squeezed his hand, a silent promise that I was here, that I'd protect him. Sophia leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. "I'm leaving," she said, the words blunt, final. "Richard has an opportunity in the Cayman Islands, a new start, a clean slate. I can't take Lucas with me, not with the custody ruling, so I'm offering you a deal, full custody, no contest, in exchange for dropping any further investigations into my financial decisions." The air around us seemed to still, the leaves pausing in their descent, as if the world held its breath. I stared at her, stunned not by her offer, but by the ease with which she surrendered her son. Lucas was a complication she was willing to discard, a pawn no longer worth playing. My heart ached for him, but it also surged with a fierce resolve. James had known this, had seen Sophia's true nature, and he'd prepared me for this moment. "You're giving up your rights to Lucas?" I asked, my voice essay steady, though inside I was reeling. Just like that? Sophia's lips twitched, a shadow of her usual smile. "It's not about giving up, Eleanor. It's about what's practical. Lucas is better off with you. He's happy here, and I'm not suited for this life anymore." Her words were cold, transactional, but I caught a flicker in her eyes, a fleeting shadow that seemed to ripple, as if something darker lurked beneath her polished exterior. The spiral in Lucas's sketchbook glowed faintly, unnoticed by Sophia, and I felt a warmth in my pocket where James's key rested. It was as if his presence was here, watching and approving. I leaned back, my mind racing. The USB recordings, the investigator's report, the financial trail. They were enough to pursue legal action, to expose Sophia's schemes with Richard. But her offer was a chance to end this without further pain for Lucas, to give him the stability he deserved. I glanced at him, his head bent over his drawing, and knew my choice. "I'll accept your terms," I said, my voice firm. "Full custody, no contest, but I'll need it in writing, signed and notarized." Sophia nodded, her relief palpable, though she tried to mask it with a tight smile. "I'll have my lawyer draw it up tomorrow." She stood, brushing imaginary lint from her coat, and looked at Lucas one last time. "Be good, sweetheart," she said, her voice lacking warmth. He didn't look up, his pencil moving steadily, and she turned away, her heels fading into the distance. As she left, the park seemed to exhale, the leaves resuming their dance, the air lighter. Lucas leaned against me, his voice small. "Is Mommy gone for good?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "She's starting a new life," I said gently, choosing my words with care. "But you're with me now, and I'll never leave you." He nodded, his small hand finding mine, and I felt a surge of love so fierce it drowned out the pain of Sophia's betrayal. The spiral in his sketchbook pulsed once, then faded, and I knew James was with us. His love, a bridge across the divide of death. The next day, Sophia's lawyer delivered the papers, her signature sharp and final. Thomas reviewed them, ensuring every detail was airtight, and we filed for permanent custody. Judge Carlton, her eyes kind but resolute, approved the petition in a brief hearing, granting me full legal guardianship of Lucas. Sophia's visitation rights were terminated at her own request, a decision that left the courtroom silent, the weight of her absence palpable. I held Lucas's hand as we left, his small fingers warm in mine, and felt a peace I hadn't known since James's death. 3 years later, the world had shifted beneath our feet, but Lucas and I had built a new one together. My home, James's home, was now ours, its walls filled with laughter and memories. The garden, once neglected, bloomed with roses Lucas had helped me plant, a tribute to his father we called James's Corner. Lucas thrived, his asthma managed, his confidence growing. He starred in his school play, a science fair champion with a smile that lit up the room. The community embraced us, friends and neighbors becoming our extended family, their support a balm for the wounds of the past. One evening, as I sorted through old papers in the study, I found another envelope tucked inside a book James had loved, a collection of poetry we'd read together when he was a boy. My name was written in his hand, the ink fresh despite the years, as if time had bent to preserve it. My heart raced as I opened it, the air humming with that familiar energy, the spiral symbol glowing faintly on the page. "Dear Mom, if you've found this, you've done what I knew you could. You've protected Lucas, given him the life I dreamed of. I'm so proud of you, and I'm sorry for the pain this journey caused. You've always been stronger than you knew, a force of love and wisdom I trusted above all else. The signs I left, the key, the spiral, the box, were my way of staying with you, of guiding you when I couldn't be there. I don't understand how it works, but I felt something shift in my final days, a power that let me leave pieces of myself for you and Lucas. Keep telling him about me. Keep loving him. And know that I'm with you in every bloom in the garden, every note of his laughter, every spiral you see. You've won, Mom, not just against Sophia, but for Lucas, for our family. Live well, and don't be afraid to embrace the magic in the world. It's real, and it's yours. With all my love, forever, James. Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of joy, of release. The room glowed softly, the spiral symbol pulsing in the air, then fading like a sigh. I felt James's presence one last time, a warm embrace that settled into my bones, a promise that he'd always be near. I tucked the letter away, knowing I'd share it with Lucas when he was older, when he could understand the depth of his father's love. That night, Lucas and I sat in the garden, the stars bright above us. He pointed to a constellation, naming it after a story James had told him, and I laughed, my heart full. The shadows that had once haunted our home were gone, replaced by light, literal and figurative. The spiral symbol appeared one last time, etched in the dew on a rose petal, then vanished, a final gift from James. I was no longer just a grieving mother or a retired professor. I was a guardian, a warrior, a keeper of mysteries I'd never fully understand. Sophia had chosen her path, and we had chosen ours, built on love, resilience, and the quiet magic of a family unbroken by betrayal. As Lucas leaned against me, his sketchbook open to a new drawing, I knew we were home, safe, whole, and forever guided by James's light. The days after James's death blurred into a tapestry of grief and discovery, each moment stitched together by the quiet hum of his lingering presence. Between the hospital's sterile chill and the funeral's somber pageantry, I felt the first stirrings of something beyond sorrow, a flicker of light in the shadows, like the spiral symbol that appeared in unexpected places, the frost on my window, the swirl of coffee in my mug, the curve of Lucas's doodles. These transitions were not mere pauses, but bridges, guiding me from shock to suspicion, from the funeral's hollow rituals to the will's shocking revelations. The air in my home seemed to shift, whispering watch her as Sophia's mask began to crack, her calculated smiles giving way to veiled threats. As I moved through the weeks of evidence gathering, the world itself seemed to conspire with me. The glow of James's photograph pulsed in my study, a beacon during late-night searches for his hidden clues. The key, the box, the USB drive. Each discovery felt like a step in a dance James had choreographed, his love transcending death to guide my hands. In the courtroom, the spiral symbol flickered in the chandelier's light, a silent affirmation as I fought for Lucas. Even in the park, where Sophia surrendered her claim, the leaves seemed to pause, framing her departure with an eerie stillness, as if the universe itself approved. Now, standing in James's corner, the garden Lucas and I had built, I reflect on the journey. The roses bloom vibrant, each petal a testament to our healing. Lucas, now 11, laughs as he chases fireflies, his sketchbook filled with spirals that echo his father's signs. The final letter, found in a book of poetry, was James's last gift. its words a warm embrace across time. "Embrace the magic," he wrote. And I have. Magic not of spells, but of love, resilience, and the mysteries that bind us. The shadows that once haunted our home are gone, replaced by a light that feels eternal. I am no longer just Eleanor, the grieving mother. I am a guardian, a keeper of secrets, a woman who faced betrayal and emerged stronger, guided by a son whose love defies the grave. As Lucas calls me to join him, his voice bright with joy, I know, Samo Ishibuch, know we've won. Not just a legal battle, but a life rebuilt on trust and hope. The spiral glows faintly in the starlight, then fades, a final nod from James. We are home, and we are whole.